Kay is a new caller in Rana in Israel. Hello, Kay.
Hi, Ian. Thank you for giving me some time to talk to you and your listeners.
Go for it.
I was on a nature trail hike with an American friend 8.5 years ago, and we were pounced on by two men who then held us at knife point, like machete point, for half an hour. And the most beautiful day. And you know, I'm a dual citizen. I'm British and an Israeli, and they found my Israeli ID card. And then really after half an hour, which was like so long, they gagged and bound us. And they bound us with my shoelaces. And then they put us on our knees, and they said that Allahu Akbar, and they just started hacking us with machetes. And my friend, I mean, she was like chopped up before me. And the only thing that I could do, that I knew to do at the last minute, was to try and play dead. So I just kept my eyes open, because that's how people die. And I witnessed her murder. And they left thinking I was dead. And somehow I managed to get up with 13 machete wounds, over 30 broken bones, a dislocated shoulder, a crushed sternum, and I walked over a mile, gag-bound, barefoot. So I've been in therapy in Israel. And I mean, of course, PTSD is very real, but I didn't manage to hear the rest of the program. But one thing that I didn't do meds. And obviously Israel has very competent trauma therapy. I did cognitive behavior therapy. I couldn't even look at a tree for months. So I did something called graduate exposure therapy. And then for the flashbacks, I had a little bit of what's called EMDR. And I think now, 8.5 years later, I mean, really, any listeners who have it, it's very, very real. And although my experience is, it's pretty horrific, it's kind of off the charts, but I don't think my experience is worse. It's simply different.
EMDR, just tell us a little bit more about EMDR, Kay, could you?
EMDR, I'm not quite sure how it works, but it's like I held these little vibration things. I mean, I was having like 1,000 something flashbacks a day, and this was after 4 years. And so the therapist just talks, like, what's the first thing coming into your mind? And I'm quite cynical. I thought, this isn't going to work. And it did. I mean, it really just was like the icing on the cake in the therapy. And I didn't have so many flashbacks at all.
Oh, what a horrific story. Did they ever find these people?
Yeah, well, what happened is I managed to stab one lightly with my penknife. And so the DNA, his blood on my sleeve, because my clothes were soaked in blood, but the DNA on my sleeve enabled the Israeli police to catch them. And I was in court with them. I actually faced my attackers in court.
What was that like?
The judge asked, oh, it was horrendous, because they were smiling and they were smirking. And when the judge said, why did you murder an American Christian? They said, oh, we thought she was Jewish. But they were so blasé and nonchalant about the whole thing. And if I can say the magic word, one of the things about PTSD is the rage. And I realized, you know, it was legitimate to feel raging. And, I mean, today I'm helping Palestinians build themselves a better life and not to indulge in victimhood. And that's because I've managed to direct and limit my rage to only the people who did it. And, of course, the Palestinian Authority who incites these people. But I think, and I'll say, I don't mean to boast, I've probably got more Arab, Muslim, Palestinian friends than a lot of Israelis I know. And that's because I've found it legitimate to own my rage. And I think anybody who suffers from PTSD or who's seen carnage, it's very, very valid, and we don't need to be dumbing that down. God. Okay, honestly, that's completely... yeah, it's crazy, huh?
I'm just completely just exhausted. What, I mean, are they in prison now?
Yeah, they are. They are in prison. They got life. There was no forensic doubt. They confessed. And, I mean, the last few years I've just been trying to stop the funding, because even the British government gives fungible money to the Palestinian Authority, and they're being rewarded thousands of pounds every year, and they've each received £70,000 each of British money. And this is where my rage is directed to now, not the innocent people.
So how many years ago was this, Kay?
This was in December 2010.
Okay, and so you're. I mean, is it? I'm trying to compare it with mine, but it's pathetic. So when you wake up,
pathetic.
Well, when I woke up in the morning, it was the first thing I thought about, and it was the light. I mean, is it? Are you at that stage now? Or have you got beyond that? Is it the first thing you think about, and then you kind of work out how to assimilate your thoughts in dealing with it, or how do you deal with it mentally first thing in the morning?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, for years...
Because that was when I couldn't handle it.
Yeah, you're just saturated. You know, I mean, you don't sleep, and if you do sleep, you wake up, and the first thing I thought is Christine Lucan has been murdered. And I was at a point where I was, you know, drinking too much, which I've never been a kind of a drinker, and I was contemplating suicide, not because I didn't feel depressed at all. I just didn't want to be having, you know, that's all I could think about. But then by slowly, and Israel's a very, very strong community, and people brought me back to life, and they'd invite me here and invite me there. They never gave advice. They were just my friends, and it was just almost the mundane that restored my sanity.
How have you been able, because this is another thing that people who have really bad experiences, and I think it's fair to say you've had one.
Yeah.
How do you deal with relationships? Do you find them quite difficult?
Yes, I mean, I'm pretty much, I used to be a very social type of tour guide. I'm very careful who I want to be with. There's some times when I want to talk about it. There's other times I don't want to talk about it. So it does affect me. But I try, look, I don't want to be glib, but, you know, it's there's an old joke about two Jewish ladies, and I'll say it because I'm Jewish, two Jewish women in a restaurant.
Go on.
And the waiter comes up and he says, "Hello, ladies, is anything okay?" You know, it's like, so I could, like, moan and complain, or I can just say, you know, thank you, God, at least
well, the other thing that they told me,
the
thing they told me about, this happens with veterans a lot, is if, you know, you were in a squad and 5 of them get blown up and you're saved, or someone's doing a fire and they're saved, but the rest of their family, they feel they're not allowed to be happy, because that's like, you feel guilty for being happy because you survived and you don't deserve to be happy because they didn't survive. Do you get that?
I do, and I think one of the most difficult things for my ongoing recovery is this is the fact, I watched Christine Lucan literally hacked to death to save my life, you know, but that doesn't mean to say that she was hacked, that she died because I watched her die. And that's a very simple sentence, but when somebody is traumatized, the guilt, the absolute survivor's guilt. I mean, I invited to Israel, and one of the things I wrote a book about it called The Rage Less Traveled, and I was so nervous about telling Christine's parents, you know, because would they feel I was like profiteering from the book, or would they feel I was bragging about life? And so the guilt, the survivor's guilt, it's huge. Well, but the cognitive behaviour therapy helps you put mind over your feelings, and it was very, very helpful to me. You're
amazing. That's all I can say, and I love that Jewish joke. So thank you very much for coming on and telling us that. What an extraordinary story. It's 3:30. Let's get the news headlines from Lisa Aziz. Before the news, the most extraordinary story, probably the most extraordinary story I've heard from anybody since I've been on LBC. Kay is her name, and I've looked this up. This is the most horrific thing. Kay Wilson hiking west of Jerusalem, 18th of December 2010, attacked by 2 Arab men with a machete. Her friend was hacked to death, effectively, and even though she was very badly injured, she was stabbed 13 times, several broken ribs, punctured lungs and diaphragm, dislocated shoulder, broken shoulder blade and broken sternum. She acted dead, and they left her alone, and she was still bound and gagged, and managed she travelled more than 1,200 metres until she reached a parking lot where a family alerted the authorities, hospitalised, etc., etc., etc. They went to prison. They'd already murdered someone that previous evening as well. And she was talking about PTSD. So an extraordinary story, and by the sounds of it, an absolutely extraordinary woman. We're talking about PTSD. We're talking about it because hundreds of people may be suffering from mental health problems after the London terror attacks in 2017. Dr. Edith Albert, the clinical lead for the attacks, believes up to 400 people may be suffering without receiving treatment. She says they'll still be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, probably, following the attacks in London Bridge, Westminster, Finsbury Park and Parsons Green. If you're one of those people, love to hear your experience.